Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interaction between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Barbara Holmes on the staff of St. John's United Methodist Church and your host for today's Austin Faith Dialogue. This program is sponsored by Austin Metropolitan Ministries, an interfaith religious organization. A regular feature of Austin Faith Dialogue has been visiting with representatives of different faith communities. The Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, have recently affiliated with Austin Metropolitan Ministries, and we're pleased to have representatives of the Mormons tradition visiting with us today. And I'd like to introduce you to Wayne Sturdivant. Wayne has many titles. He's in leadership roles, and we're going to talk a little about some of the things that you do in your congregation, and appreciate your being here.
Thank you very much.
And Williams is also as busy and committed and presides over a large women's organization called the Relief Society, and we want to hear some more about that too. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so excited about learning more about the Mormon tradition and some of the things that you've done. But first I want to learn a little bit more about each of you, simply because our tradition, I think, says a good bit about us. And were you, did you grow up in the Mormon tradition?
I sure did.
Did you?
I've been a member of the church all my life.
And so your family was active?
Right, my family and my grandparents, we've gone back clear just about to the beginning. I guess when the missionaries came to England is probably the first ones that came over.
So you really have not known anything else. It's been all of your life.
Right, it sure has.
Well, that's one perspective, but Wayne, I understand that you have come a little more recently to the tradition.
Yes, I came into the church at age 19. My parents were in the military, so I came to what you might call a general Protestant faith as I went to church. About 14 years of age, I found the Presbyterian church and joined them, and was with them for a while. After I joined the military, I was introduced to this church.
Well, sometimes it takes a little while to find just the right home for you, and it sounds like you found it because you are very active and involved. And I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit. There's a lot of things that I want to learn, but I think when you say the Mormons, almost anybody would immediately identify the marvelous tabernacle choir that we all know, and that's such a marvelous gift your faith community has given to the world at large. Is that a long-standing tradition? Do you know anything about, has that a long, long history?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, music is a very important part of our religion. You've probably heard of the music and the spoken word, which has been a tradition for years since, I think it was 1929. And from that point forward, they've been on the air. Also, of course, they've gone on tour. They've been in inaugurations, presidential inaugurations.
Oh, yes. And isn't that funny? A lot of the faith traditions have only come to the larger broadcast or radio sound medium relatively recently, but that one goes way back. Yes. And another thing that comes to my mind, I've heard people talk about the family records that are at the headquarters in Utah, and they are unparalleled as far as someone could trace their family roots from that. Is that not so?
Absolutely. We've got one of the largest libraries in the world, and incidentally, we have access to those records right here in Austin. We have 3 genealogical libraries in the area, one in San Marcos, a very active one, and one in Georgetown, and one right here in the north part of Austin.
Well, are those records connected so that do you have, what were you saying you have access to, the ones in Salt Lake?
We have access to all the records, either through microfilm or microfiche. We have all sorts of resources here in town where you can find the tape that you'd like to order, and then you can order that for a small fee.
Oh, that's what you do. You would order a tape. And is that just for members only?
No, absolutely not. It's open to the public and free of charge for the use. Like I said, there's a slight charge for if you order a tape.
so that if someone was researching their family tree, they could go, tell us about the library that they could go to, its name and phone number, or?
Okay, we have one library that I'll give just their phone number. It's 837-3629, which is our stake family history library. It's off of Rutherford Lane and I-35, and they're open basically from Tuesday to Thursday from 10 to 1. Also Monday through Thursday from 10 to 1. And in the evenings, Tuesday through Thursday from 6 to 9. And on Saturday from 9 to 3. And the reason I mention that is because when people call, since it's staffed by volunteers, we ask you to have patience. It'll be during those times that someone will answer the phone.
So there's a block of mornings, a block of afternoons, and some evening, but it's all volunteer run?
Absolutely.
I think there's some people working that have a summertime project, family reunions. After family reunions, it seems like everybody go home and they start hunting up their family trees. So they could call and go in there and do some research from right here in Austin.
Absolutely.
Well, that's just wonderful. See, I didn't know that, and sometimes I don't think we know enough about each other's faith traditions. And one of the things I've enjoyed about being a host on this Austin Faith Dialogue is these shows where you visit. But I have learned that the language of the family changes from group to group. So we may need to work on our language a little bit. For instance, the term stake is one that would compare to what?
To a diocese.
To a diocese. And there was the clergy, your what, preacher, minister, tell me the proper language here. And
the bishop, bishop in the wards, but the ward is a congregation, and the branches are a smaller congregation, and the president is like the pastor of that.
So there is a clergy.
Yes.
And I want us to come from the national picture now in the headquarters and the choir to our local situation. And Wayne, why don't you talk a little bit about how many congregations are here, or what is the membership?
Okay, if you like, I will start from our headquarters, of course, Salt Lake City. Our president of our church, which we call the prophet, is part of a presidency of 3 as leaders of our church. Second in authority to them is the quorum of the 12 apostles, and we're patterned after the early church. From there we have areas or geographical boundaries so that we might minister a little bit better and with quite a bit more accountability, if you will. And we have what's called a stake, like a stake in a tent, as we have here, about 5,000 members in this geographical area, which goes from Shiner to Rockdale over to Marble Falls. Now there's a stake presidency, a membership of 3, our stake president and 2 counselors, and we also have a high council of 12 or more brethren who help to lead out in the stake. And of course, our Relief Society presidency and the other leaders of the organizations. In town, we have 4 chapels. We have quite a number of congregations. We do have multi-use chapels, more than 1 congregation in the building.
Well, how do you do that? As I knew that you have multi-use, and in conversation with you, you talked about you used them in 3-hour blocks?
There's 3 different meetings that are done.
Well, does the pastor, the minister, the bishop, is there one for each service? Is it the same one?
Each ward has its own bishop and counselors. And they're a lay ministry, of course, they're not paid. And so the speakers are also part of the congregation also.
Now, when you were saying the way that it was structured in the headquarters, the thought crossed my mind, if I was to go in, or if you were to go to a Mormon church in New Jersey or Florida, would it be like one here in Austin?
Absolutely. It's the same wherever you go. We do meet on Sunday. That's our Sabbath. And our worship service is very similar. We start with an opening song and an invocation, and then we'll have the greeting and any business. We do a lot of business by common consent in our church.
But there's some business conducted during a worship service, or the
preceding
the
time that we have what we call our sacrament or communion. The business, since we have a lay ministry and lay leadership, There are those who are called and those who are released. And again, that's done by common consent. The membership of the congregation is given the opportunity to voice their thanks or raise their hand and vote of thanks for the service done and to support those who are coming in. Then we have, again, our sacrament service. We do that weekly. I know in many churches you have communion maybe once a month or twice a month. We do ours weekly, where we renew our covenants with our Father in heaven, those things that, you know...
and
nice.
the elements are...
We use bread and water.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't use grape juice or unleavened bread. It's, for us, that wasn't really important. It's the idea, the similitude, in the similitude thereof.
And that's a weekly sacramental service.
Yes.
And
after that, then we have our inspirational and our devotion and our speakers.
And the quote, the preacher, the speaker is someone, a lay member,
Right.
but is it the same person every week that's rotated, or...
Not
you know,
only is
that's
that-
kind of intimidating. I don't know how you would get...
Not only is it rotated, but we usually and generally have a youth speaker, maybe one or two, and it gives the young people an opportunity to speak. And I think you'll find that many of the Mormon young people you'll find to be very accomplished speakers as a result.
Well, before we leave this a little bit about organization, something that varies from tradition to tradition is where the decision-making power is. It sounds like this is a shared decision-making. You all acknowledge headquarters. In my denomination, we're familiar with connecting with other parts of the United Methodist family. But say you wanted another preacher, what would happen?
Well, in the case if we're growing to the point where we need another congregation, then that could happen. We could suggest or recommend that a particular ward or branch be divided into another geographical area.
So
At that
your
point,
congregation can make recommendations to be considered.
to the stake, and then the stake takes it to central headquarters of the church, yes, and then they will either approve or disapprove the action. A very important part of that is distribution of youth and distribution of leadership potential and the opportunities to minister to those in the area to make sure that they're all covered.
But I bet you that you're represented on the stake. You're in that decision making. Your congregation probably has members that are sent there, or you're represented probably at other levels of the church.
Generally, the stake is the one who puts in the recommendation, with the input, of course, from the congregations, and then yes, we have an area presidency that takes our case forward and talks to the leadership and answers any questions that might come up.
Well, Ann, talk to me a little bit about what a typical Sunday morning, well, Sunday would be like, because you've got 3-hour blocks, and the first one's what, 9 to 12?
We meet, well, 10 to 11. It's about 50 minutes, actually.
And part of that is also Christian
Sunday
education?
School. Yeah. Yes, we go to Sunday school first. Some have got theirs changed around, so their meeting's a little different, but there's always the same 3. But yes, you go to Sunday school, and in the class there, and you're instructed in the spiritual things. Right now in our adult class, we're studying the Old Testament, which is really interesting, and we have teachers for all these different classes, and our youth have special classes.
One group would come. Is there some way that people are assigned, or is it where they live? How do you know where to go to church?
It's your area. It's the area in which you live.
The area.
It's the boundaries.
Geographical.
It's geographical.
And there's a reason for that, if I might, so that we can minister to each other's needs. An important feature of our church is that we take care of our members, and we minister to them monthly, either by home teachers who go to the homes and bring a message, help if there's any need.
Well, now, would this be even if people were participating in the worship? It's a home visit, just...
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a month, at least once a month, we go to visit our families, and it's an important part of our church because it brings us very close together. But that's the reason for the geographical boundaries, so that we can account for each other. And if there's ever an emergency, you can be sure that we'll be able to do exactly that.
be in touch,
be able to be in touch and help each other.
Account for everyone.
That's
So when one group finishes, then there's an hour or so and another group comes?
Yes, actually, I didn't get through with the 3 different parts. Then there is a Relief Society meeting. And in that meeting, we also have instruction. And it might be spiritual that day or compassionate service or on the family.
Now, let's back up a minute. The Relief Society,
yes, the women
meets every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
And you need to tell us what the Relief Society is.
Well, it's one of the oldest and largest women's organizations in the world. It was started in 1842 in Nauvoo, and it was to help minister to the needs of those that were in need and needed help in all ways, whether it was with food or clothing or compassionate aid. And
so you meet every Sunday?
Yes,
And then are there meetings of the Relief Society besides Sundays?
Yes, then they meet once a month in what they call a homemaking meeting.
Yeah.
And there you can learn all kinds of things. There can be a class on about anything you want to learn.
Well, in your situation, how large is that society meeting on Sunday morning? Is it a fairly large group, 40 or 50 or
Well, it's each
10
ward. On Sunday morning, yes, there's probably, and then on the weekdays too, or on the one time a month.
So along with music, nurturing, looking after each other is a very, very important part of your tradition.
right. Absolutely.
Now, you were saying there's about 5,000 members in this geographic region,
Right.
in the region that the stake encompasses, which is some outlying towns around Austin.
Right, from Shiner to
Well, that's
to
pretty
Bastrop
outlying.
but we have the majority of the distribution right here around in the metropolitan area.
Can I give you an interesting fact?
Sure.
Years ago, let's see, in about, I believe it was in the 1930s, when it was a little later than that, but when they joined the Houston stake, which was the whole area because so many people, and it covered 60,000 square miles, the stake did. And that's bigger than the state of Utah. And so when they went to meetings, of course, they went clear to Houston for their leadership meetings and so on. And then there was 4,300 people at that time in that 60,000 square miles. And now we have about 5,000 right here around Austin. So it has really grown.
That does help. That is a good perspective to have. When you were mentioning the youth, I wanted to hear a little more about one thing that I know about your faith is the strong missionary outreach that you have. And why don't you talk about the youth? And I know that couples do it also, but that is a fairly, I wouldn't say a requirement, but do not a lot of the youth undertake a mission experience?
The young men are expected to go, I don't want to use those words exactly, I guess. They're encouraged to go, and we hope that they would go and decide to go on their own. But indeed, they go off about age 19, generally, for a 2-year mission. Again, volunteer without any pay. They're supported by their family or monies that they've earned and saved along the way.
Would this cover long distances, or would it be?
Absolutely. Anywhere around the world. The request goes in from the stake again to the church headquarters, at which point they're placed in an area. And they go to Salt Lake for missionary training, and then from there to their assignment.
Now, is the main purpose of this the kind of nurturing and witnessing, or do they teach English, or what is the goal in this experience for youngsters?
This particular one for the youth is indeed a proselyting mission.
To take the word.
And we do, currently, the missionaries are expected to do some ministering each week, help somebody in need. There are other types of missions, indeed, for health missions, medical missions, building missions. There are those who work at visitor centers. As a matter of fact, Ann has some relatives who just returned from a mission in San Diego.
Yes.
And you were saying that the mission terms are not limited to the youth. That was my knowledge. I thought that was the most strongest identification I had. But you say that couples or
Yes.
will take on
And
a...
young women go also. Not as many go, but there are young women go, and they're a little older. They don't go until they're 21, and their missions are just 18 months. But they do go. I had a daughter that went to France, and I've had a son that went to Paraguay, and it's a marvelous experience for them. They learn to love those people while they're teaching them, you know, and learn about the country, and they come home they grow up. It's a really fine experience.
And I'm sure that
And then couples
church
go.
family doors are open to them, but that's pretty scary, being on your own as far as finding the meals and making arrangements. And
Right.
so I can see how they'd really grow
Well, they have
up.
a mission president that looks out for them, too, and sees where they are, and they have conferences where they all get together, and they're taught, too, as they go out and do their teaching. So
But couples also,
Couples
I
go.
mean adults.
adults,
Mhm.
yes, they do. And I've had an uncle and aunt that went to Ireland, and it's really exciting, and one that went to San Diego. And
Did you have that experience
no,
as a
I
young
haven't.
woman?
No, I didn't. I wished I did.
Did you have that? You were about that age
No.
when you came into
No, I
the
was already in the
church?
military by that time. I have had the experience of being what's called a stake missionary, a member who does missionary work, member missionary work, if you will.
I bet that really can be a life-changing experience for those, particularly the
absolutely.
young people. Well, I meant to ask you at the very first, we were talking about the headquarters, and but I didn't ask about how the Mormons got to Central Texas. Do you know anything about how you all wound up down here?
Well, when the body of the saints went from Nauvoo, headed for Salt Lake, why, there was about 130 of them under the direction of Lyman White, W-I-G-H-T, that wanted to come to Texas to colonize, and so they did. And they first landed down in Weberville.
Now, when was this? When would this
This
be?
was in 1846, 1845, 1846.
My.
And they were in Weberville, and they were on the river, and they were flooded out. And so then they moved up by the Tom Miller Dam and on the Redbud Trail. And in fact, if you look on the map, it still says Mormon. Mormon Falls is what I think it says.
Well,
So it's
why
on the
did they
map.
settle on the river?
I think that, well, they were, what they did was they were farmers, and they knew how to take care of themselves, and a mill was just a really natural thing to do. And they built a grist mill up by Tom Miller Dam. And they also built a furniture factory and some other things that were really needed in the area. And they contracted and built the first jail that Austin ever had.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so they were there for a while, and they were flooded out again. And they moved by, well, not too far from Marble Falls. And then they were also, I think the river wasn't very good to them again, and they ended up in Fredericksburg. And in Fredericksburg, they were there when the German immigrants came in, and they helped them a lot, helped them learn how to exist in a new area. And the German folks loved them, and they have set up a commemorative type, there's a plaque and a water wheel that really turns. I don't think it was not from the pioneers, but it's a commemorative.
Well, you're saying that on a city map, Tom Miller Dam might still have that
It
designation?
does, it's there. Well, it's up by it there. It says that Mormon Falls.
Well, I'm going to have to look at that. That's fascinating. And that's very old. Some of the oldest congregations in Austin date about that time. So the roots have been here all this time. But if they were going to have contact with others, later on they went all the way down to Houston. Is that what you were saying? They were part of that?
Well, no,
until-
first of all, there at the beginning, they were there until in Fredericksburg. In about 1859, the settlement broke up because some moved away, and they kind of scattered around. And there isn't really much said about it until about 1890-something, about 1896, and there was missionaries mentioned in the area. And they would visit and travel around to all the different little groups and talk to them. More or less, it was probably just family to family.
So the official date of the first congregation in Austin is?
Well, it was about 1924 when they started meeting in each other's homes. And they met in each other's homes for a while, and then they started at about 1930. They were meeting in the halls, you know, like the Knights of Columbus Hall and so on.
I see.
And starting their building fund. And in I was trying to think what it was, 1939, I believe. I can be off on these dates a little bit. They moved into a building in the 3300 block of Red River and had their own little building. In fact, the ladies before that, they would give 50 cents a week is what they were giving to start the building fund.
The building fund. Well, and now you're saying there's 8 congregations within the metropolitan area, and in the stake 16. 14. And well, you can always do a little exaggerating there, but I know Metropolitan Ministries is very pleased to have you in their midst, and you all jumped in with a lot of activity because you came on board about the time that housing project, the hands-on housing.
And we were delighted to be invited into that. About 50 of our people got together, and as many congregations did, took on a house and renovated the home, and to the delight of family who appreciated our services. And we appreciated the opportunity to serve too, and look forward to the next time.
Well, I'm sure there will be a next time, and we're most appreciative. There's a lot of other things I could ask you, but the time has just gone by, and we've learned a little. That history is so fascinating that I could ask you lots of questions about that. But Wayne, thank you for being here, and Ann, you've added a whole lot to our larger knowledge about another faith tradition and how you've grown up in it and how you've become attracted to it, and we're just very, very grateful that you were with us today.
Thank you.
And thanks you for joining us on Austin Faith Dialogue. We hope you'll be back same time next week, and may you experience the grace of God in your life in the week ahead. Good day.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.